You may remember back at this time last year, the Fremantle Council voted 10-1 in favour of ditching Australia Day fireworks out of sensitivity to Aborigines who may identify January 26th as Invasion Day. More recently, the taxpayer-funded Triple J asked the burning question on everyone's lips whether they should change the date of their annual Hottest 100 countdown, which is held on Australia Day every year. I wasn't even aware this countdown existed, nor was I aware anyone under the age of 60 still listened to the radio. And then we found out this week that Yarra City Council in Melbourne voted, amongst other things, to stop holding citizenship ceremonies on January 26th. Here's a list of all the resolutions that were passed. Yarra Council voted to refer to Australia Day as January 26 until another more appropriate term is adopted nationally. Stop holding citizenship ceremonies on January 26. Hold a small-scale, culturally sensitive event featuring a smoking ceremony that acknowledges the loss of culture, language and identity felt by Aboriginal community on January 26th. I'm sure that'll be a blast. Adopt a communications plan that focuses on broader community education to help people better understand Aboriginal community experiences of January 26th. Or in other words, engage in a community-wide guilt-shaming exercise. Officially support the Change the Date campaign in council publications and on social media. Consider ways to lobby the federal government to change the date of Australia Day. So in other words, the Yarra City Council has gone full-blown activist. Now this drew a rebuke from the Prime Minister of Australia and surprisingly Premier Daniel Andrews, usually eager to jump on a virtue signalling bandwagon. Andrews and Assistant Minister for Immigration Alex Hawke warned Greens-dominated councils could be banned from hosting citizenship ceremonies. Well, colour me green. Fancy that. The Yarra City Council is dominated by Greens, or in other words, economically illiterate loonbags. So the council says they commissioned an independent survey of 300 non-Indigenous people that showed strong support for change. Well, that puts them at odds with the broader Australian community. The Guardian commissioned a survey back in January showing that only 15% of Australians want Australia Day changed to another date, whilst 54% of Indigenous Australians said they wanted to change the date. So the vast majority of Australians, including nearly half of Indigenous Australians, want to keep January 26th as Australia Day. Now, we shouldn't dismiss the concerns of Indigenous Australians, but I just wonder what changing the date will actually do for Indigenous communities. Will it improve the state of Aboriginal families, education and employment prospects? This clip is from a video I made back in February featuring Anthony Dillon on the ABC in the wake of this year's Australia Day protests.
Dr. Anthony Dillon is a lecturer in positive psychology and education at the Australian Catholic University. He identifies as an Aboriginal Australian and doesn't think the date needs to change. Dr. Dillon is here with me now. Thank you for coming in. Can you please tell us why your position is not to change the date?
Because I think there are bigger issues for Aboriginal people to deal with.
All right, and so I suppose you do see, though, that there have been thousands of people out on the streets around the country today saying that the very date of this national holiday actually does provoke quite strong emotions in them. What would be the downside to accommodating those emotions and changing the date? Well,
first of all, it's hard to miss them, so yes, we've seen them. I do question the sincerity of those emotions, and I base that on the fact that while they're out there protesting, we don't see anywhere near the number of people protesting about the issues happening today, like child abuse, poverty, violence, unclean, unsafe communities. So that's why I question their sincerity.
So can I ask, do you celebrate Australia Day?
Yes, I do. Not in a big way, but I just take the time to, reflect on what happened all those years ago. I don't dwell on it. I certainly don't make it an excuse for my emotion today. But I also partake in fellowship with friends on, just what a great country Australia is.
But surely we're looking at some of the pictures from the marches today. You're not saying that all of the people that have participated in these marches are turning their backs on the other issues which are facing Indigenous Australians today?
Well, I would like to hear from them what are their priorities, and I would ask them, how do you think marching is going to solve the more serious problems that are happening in 2017.
Isn't it beautiful when designated victims refuse to play their designated role? And Dylan is absolutely right. What are these protesters doing to change their communities? Changing the date is a symbolic gesture, as is the push for constitutional recognition, but it does nothing to address the real problems in Aboriginal communities today. I was 25 years old when Australians voted on a referendum to alter the Constitution to establish the Commonwealth of Australia as a republic, with the Queen and Governor-General being replaced by a president appointed by a two-thirds majority of the members of the Commonwealth Parliament. The referendum was defeated 55% no to 45% yes, and at that time there was much discussion about changing the Australian flag. I remember being in favour of changing it to green and gold like the Olympic colours. Lots of Commonwealth nations have changed their flags. Why couldn't we? There was also talk about changing the national anthem. Personally, I think the national anthem is something we should all feel pride in, but I've always found the Australian anthem a bit dreary. Girt by sea. Really? I'm not going to get into the pros and cons of changing flags, anthems and dates, except to say that whilst it's easy to decide to change something, it's much harder to agree on what to change it to. This is not a conservative argument that we should never change anything, but given that today we live in the age of identity politics, it would seem to be the exact worst time in which to go changing fundamental symbols and traditions of our country. Imagine proposals today for changing the flag. Self-styled progressives would want some combination of the Aboriginal flag, the LGBTI alphabet flag, and the hammer and sickle. Imagine the national anthem. Instead of Australians all let us rejoice for we are young and free, we'd have Australians all, especially Indigenous people, LGBTI alphabets, immigrants and women, but not white males, for they are evil genocidal maniacs. Now, perhaps that's a slight exaggeration, but I think you get the point. If the vast majority of Australians are happy with the date for now, then there's no need to go changing it. But of course, that's not going to stop the advocates from launching a massive campaign to change the date, no doubt with the complicity of the taxpayer-funded ABC, from now until Australia Day 2018. Mark Latham has anticipated this and has set up a petition to save Australia Day. So if you think Australia Day is worth preserving on January 26th, head on over to Mark's website, link in the description, and sign the petition. Now, unfortunately, Yarra City probably won't be the last council to make such pronouncements in the run-up to Australia Day next year. But just remember, if you are a resident in one of those communities and still value Australia Day the way it is, there's nothing stopping you from having a barbie, going to the beach, or doing whatever you normally do to celebrate Australia Day. And while you're at it, you might want to suggest to any local councils that don't want to recognise Australia Day that you'll expect to see them at work on Friday 26th, January 2018. So do you think we should change the date for Australia Day, or should we just refrain from trying to fix something that isn't broken? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.